It's tea time. All rise.
This time we'll call the monthly meeting to order, and I'll ask that you stand, and we'll have the invocation by Commissioner Langley, and then the pledge will be led by Commissioner Buzzio.
Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father, we are grateful and thankful for the opportunity to assemble here one more time. We thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to serve your people. Now give us wisdom and guidance, God, in making wise and prudent decisions. In the matchless name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I recognize any of the commissioners that has a conflict of interest that they need to disclose. Hearing none, the first thing I'm going to do tonight is recognize our FEMA representative that's here, and that's Mr. T.D. Kennard. And if you would like to stand up and say anything and recognize the other people that are with you, that would be great.
You didn't put you on a spot there.
Or you can do it from right there, whatever you would like to do. But I understand there's three or four people with you.
I didn't plan to say anything, but we're happy to be in this community. We're working hard to help all of the folks that live here. And we have quite a few more that are starting to come in, so we appreciate it. This is our intergovernmental affairs specialist here, and this is my partner from the state, Charles Tripp.
Thank you very much for being here and trying to do what you can for our citizens here in Beaufort County. All right, we're down to item number D, the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to make some changes. As you know, and other members of the board know, Commissioner Brin underwent some serious surgery last weekend, and lucky to have him here today, but he has difficulty sitting for any length of time. So I was wondering if we could move a couple of the items up that he has extreme interest in, so then he can ask the board to excuse him from any further action.
All right.
So what I'd like to do is move the items for decision. Item number 3, draft Beaufort County Solar Energy Facilities Ordinance. If we can move that up, that so it would follow the public hearing.
Okay.
I'd also like to move up so that there's another issue that he has interest in, and that would be the request for
Item number 6.
number 6, Planning Board appointee, Earth representative. Move that up so we can cast his vote on that and make any comments that he wishes. And on that one, since we now have 2 candidates, the cover memo language on that should be changed.
It was changed.
It was changed, okay. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to add to the agenda a discussion of the Wilmington District Federal Court subpoena having to do with illegal voting
Okay.
for discussion.
You want to add it under discussion?
Wherever it goes, is fine with me.
Okay.
It could become a decision item, but,
Well, we'll move it to decision.
okay.
Any other changes? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Got a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor of those changes, please raise your right hand. Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to go into our first public hearing, and I need a motion to move into the public hearing.
So moved.
Got a motion to move into the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second. All those in favor of that, please raise your right hand. Okay. Any opposed? All right. Kevin? Is Kevin here?
It's me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry,
It
Kevin.
does have Kevin.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Mark.
Kevin's actually under the weather.
All right.
Yeah, Kevin is under the weather, so you have me tonight. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and County Commissioners. This public hearing is to receive comments on the closeout of the 2016 CDBG Fellows Grant Program. On July 25th, 2016, Beaufort County received a CDBG Fellows Grant to assist Beaufort County and its municipalities in developing capacity to assist its citizens by adding training to support professional development for local government professionals. Beaufort County government employees attended 17 training programs, representative from the City of Washington 2, Pantego 1, Bellhaven 1, Chuckawinity 1, and Aurora also attended one training session. In total, 23 local government representatives received training under this program. This included a mayor, town councilman, town manager, and local government employees. The project was funded 100% by Community Development Block Grant funds. $43,309.67 was spent on the capacity building, and the remaining $6,690.33 will be de-obligated. After the public hearing, we need a motion to close out the grant and authorization for the chairman to sign the closeout documents.
Is there any public citizen here that would like to speak on this? No one signed up for it, but we have time if anybody would like to speak. All right, we need a motion to come out of the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of coming out of this hearing, raise your right hand. All right, thank you, Mark.
Is that enough for the motion to sign the document?
Actually, and they're seeking a motion also to close out the grant and allow the
I
chairman.
think it's an agenda item.
Yep, you're right. My apologies.
There's an agenda item
Number
later.
2.
I'm sorry.
Mark.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to need a motion. Did we have a motion to go into the next public hearing?
That's it.
All right, need a motion to go into the public hearing on solar energy facilities.
So moved.
Got a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion and second. All those in favor of going into the public hearing, raise your right hand. All right, at this time, I'll recognize Jamie Heath. And Jamie is our county planner.
Good evening. So a public hearing was advertised in the Washington Daily News on September 21st and September 28th, and the draft Beaufort County Solar Energy Facilities Ordinance has been posted on the county website for public review since September 21st. Prior to receiving public comments, I'm going to go through a brief PowerPoint to summarize the ordinance. So again, this is the draft Beaufort County Solar Energy Facilities Ordinance. Just to briefly touch on sections 1 through 5. Section 1 is current local ordinance repealed and states that the Beaufort County Solar Farm Setbacks Ordinance, which was adopted on September 9th, 2013, is hereby repealed in its entirety and replaced with this ordinance.
Jamie, excuse me. Do you mind cutting that light off, that switch right there? Thank you.
Section 2 is purpose. Section 3, authority. Section 4, permit required, states that the ordinance applies to all areas of Beaufort County except those lands lying within the jurisdiction of any municipality, and states that solar energy facilities must obtain a development permit from the planning department prior to applying for building permits. Section 5 is definitions. Section 6, let's spend a bit of time on, that's the permit requirements. 6.1 states, before a building permit may be submitted for a solar energy facility, a solar energy facility development permit must first be approved by the planning board. And that's a change from the previous ordinance, which did not require planning board approval. In the previous ordinance, the approval was done at the administrative or at the staff level. Section 6.2, permit application, reviews what is required in the application package. 6.2A requires a narrative overview of the solar energy facility, including its generating capacity. 6.2B requires an inventory, which is a tabulation describing the number, specifications, and type of each proposed solar array, including their generating capacity, dimensions and respective manufacturers, and details on accessory buildings and accessory equipment. This is a new requirement. The previous ordinance did not request details on the type of equipment that was used. Continuing with the permit requirements, 6.2C requires a vicinity map. 6.2D requires a site plan, which should include the planned location of each solar array, all property lines within 300 feet, setbacks and separation distances from protected buildings, access road and turnout locations, substations and accessory equipment, electrical cabling and associated transmission lines, the location of any underground power lines, conservation areas, the location and width of driveways and private roads, and a landscaping and fencing plan. And the previous ordinance did require a site plan, but this is requiring more details on the location of the equipment within the improved area than the previous ordinance required. 6.2E miscellaneous, the applicant shall provide the following to the planning board. 1, a certification that the proposal is for an International Electrical Congress solar array that is designed to meet all North Carolina building codes. That's a new requirement in this ordinance. And a certification that the solar arrays pass the Environmental Protection Agency's toxicity characteristic leaching procedure, or TLCP test. That's also a new requirement. Signed copies of all original leases, easements, and agreements for the solar energy facility, copies of any required state and federal permits, licenses, etc., and other relevant studies, reports, certifications, and approvals as may be reasonably requested by the planning board. 6.2F requires a maintenance plan, and that should detail procedures for equipment inspections and maintenance, fence maintenance, landscaping maintenance, and road maintenance. And that maintenance plan is a new requirement with this ordinance. Abandonment and decommissioning plan. Section 6.3G1 is abandonment. A solar energy facility that ceases to produce energy for 12 months is considered abandoned. The solar energy facility owner is responsible for removing all equipment and facilities and restoring the parcel to its condition prior to development of the solar energy facility. And this abandonment section is also in the current ordinance, but it really had no follow-up requirements to assist with enforcement, which is where number 2 and 3 come in. So 6.3G2, decommissioning plan. The decommissioning plan should include the anticipated life of the solar energy facility, define conditions upon which decommissioning will be initiated, plan for removal of all non-utility owned equipment, conduits, structures, fencing, solar panels, roads, and foundations, and restoration of the property to a condition prior to development of the solar energy facility. And that decommissioning plan is a new requirement. And 6.3G3, the performance guarantee. The applicant must provide the county with a form of surety equal to 125% of the entire cost of decommissioning under the plan as estimated by a North Carolina licensed engineer under seal, and that is also a new requirement. In Section 7, design standards, also want to spend a few minutes on that. 7.1 is the setback and separation requirements. The fence which secures the solar energy facility's improved areas shall be set back at least 100 feet from all property lines and public rights-of-way. The current ordinance requires a 50-foot setback from all property lines and rights-of-way, so that doubles that required setback. And also the solar arrays and other equipment shall be set back at least 25 feet from the interior fence line of the solar energy facility, and that is a new requirement. Solar energy facilities shall be separated by a minimum distance of 300 feet from all residential, commercial, and institutional buildings, with the exception of accessory buildings such as storage sheds. We did include an option for a waiver from all or part of that separation requirement if the owner of the protected building agrees to that, but the primary setback requirements would still apply even if a waiver were granted. And the change from the current ordinance requires a 100-foot setback from any business or residential structure, so what we're requiring now is 3 times what the current ordinance requires. And just for clarity, and note that the minimum setbacks for a solar energy facility shall be measured from the required fence of the facility. Section 7.2 is fencing. A fence is required around the entire perimeter of the solar energy facility to secure its improved areas. The location of the fence is determined by the required setback and separation requirements. All solar arrays and other equipment must be located inside the fence. The fence must be a minimum of 6 feet in height and shall be constructed of chain link. Angled barbed wire shall run along the top of the fence for the entire perimeter of the fence for security, and the gate for ingress and egress must be locked for security. And that is a new requirement. The previous ordinance didn't address fencing. In Section 7.3, vegetative buffer. A vegetative buffer shall be installed in front of the fence within the required setback of the solar energy facility for the entire perimeter of the solar energy facility. The previous ordinance required a vegetative buffer only adjacent to residential and commercial structures that were within 100 feet of the solar energy facility, but not around the entire perimeter, and it required a 70-foot length buffer for each of those structures. But again, with the new ordinance, we're now requiring it around the entire perimeter of the facility. The vegetative buffer shall consist of a row of evergreen bushes, which is the same as the previous ordinance, planted no more than 8 feet apart. The previous ordinance required 10 feet apart, and the bushes shall be at least 6 feet tall at the time of planting and will reach a minimum height of 15 feet within 3 years of planting, compared to the previous ordinance, which required 4 feet tall at the time of planting and will reach a minimum height of 6 feet within 5 years of planting. Continuing with the vegetative buffer, must provide full screening from 2 feet above ground level to the required 15-foot height, and bushes must grow to a minimum of 8 foot in width at the base, or the spacing between bushes must be reduced. Those are new requirements that were added to ensure full screening for that vegetative buffer. And where adequate vegetative screening exists on the parcel where the solar energy facility is located, the existing vegetative buffer may be used with the approval of the planning board. And the vegetative buffer must be maintained, including keeping vegetation healthy, neat, and orderly in appearance and free of litter and debris, as it was in the previous ordinance as well. 7.4, ground cover. Soil with adequate vegetative cover must be maintained under and around the panels in order to reduce runoff and erosion. Native grasses and wildflowers are encouraged, and the ordinance refers to the North Carolina Wildlife Commission's publication, Recommendations for Establishing Native Pollinator Habitat on Solar Farms in North Carolina. And this is a new requirement. Ground cover was not addressed in the previous ordinance. 7.5, environmental impacts. Solar energy facilities must meet all requirements of the state and federal government and provide copies of all state and federal permits, including but not limited to the stormwater permit and erosion and sedimentation control permits from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity from the North Carolina Utilities Commission, and the Section 404 wetlands permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers where applicable. Section 7.6 is roads. The minimum right-of-way width of private roads and driveways serving the solar energy facility shall be 50 feet. Private roads and driveways shall be constructed to meet all of the North Carolina DOT's standards, design standards, except for applying crushed stone for paving. A driveway permit must be obtained from NCDOT, and a copy must be provided. The solar energy facility owner shall be responsible for road maintenance, including keeping roads and driveways serving the solar energy facility graded, free of potholes, and passable in all weather. And this is a new requirement. The previous ordinance did not address the roads. 7.7, lighting and electrical emissions. The design and construction of solar energy facilities shall not produce light emissions that would interfere with pilot vision and/or traffic control operations. 7.8, power lines. On-site power lines between solar panels and inverters shall be placed underground and must meet all requirements of the North Carolina Electrical Code. 7.9, solar panel height. The height of solar panels shall not exceed the height of the required vegetative buffer, and that is a new requirement. And that's all for Section 7. Section 8 is solar energy facility permit fees. A non-refundable application fee of $500 shall be submitted with each application for a solar energy facility development permit, and that is a new fee. The previous ordinance did not require an application fee. Section 9, Planning Board decision. 9.1, public hearing. Input of local citizens shall be solicited by the Planning Board in at least one public hearing. 9.2, approval. All requirements of the ordinance must be satisfied, and the Planning Board decides on approval based on majority vote. 9.3, expiration of approval. Approval expires if construction has not begun within 365 days. Approval automatically expires if there are changes in ownership, cessation of the corporation or partnership, or a transfer to another person. In this case, the new owner has 60 days to submit a new permit application. And this is a new requirement. As I mentioned, the previous ordinance had staff level approval. It didn't go to the planning board. There was no public hearing required, and no new application was needed in the event of an ownership change. And just briefly touching on sections 10 to 15. Section 10 is appeals. Appeals from the planning board decision go to the Beaufort County Board of Commissioners. If they wanted to appeal farther than that, it would go to the State Supreme Court. Section 11, variances. Variances may be authorized by the planning board only if the North Carolina general statutes criteria is satisfied, which is difficult to do. And the most important point of proof is that the hardship must be related to a condition peculiar to the property involved. Section 12 is enforcement, penalties, and remedies for violations. Most notable thing there is that the fine for violation of the ordinance is $500 per day of violation. Section 13 is applicability, Section 14 severability, and the final Section 15 is adoption. And that's all I have. If you want to go to public hearing.
Thank you. We have two people, and I'm sure there may be other people in the room that would like to speak. The first one I have is Philip Madry. Is there anyone in the hallway? If there is, see if it's Philip. Okay. The second one I have on here is Keith Kidwell. Keith? And I'll ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes.
All these rules.
Pardon?
All these rules. Good evening, Mr. Commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening on the solar energy facilities in Beaufort County. I do commend you on the work that you've done to protect the property rights, not only of the landowners of the facilities, but also of the surrounding properties. It's very important that we keep that in mind as we build these facilities. I think that what you've done here does a fine job of encompassing and protecting those rights, both from both of their perspectives. So thank you very much for that. I really want to speak this evening to you and to the general public as we look at these solar facilities throughout Beaufort County. I just spent a good portion of my summer going cross-country camping with my grandchildren, and one of the things we noted is the solar and wind facilities and the damage done aesthetically to our environment. It's just absolutely amazing how horrible these things look. People talk about the oil facilities. I passed a lot of those as well. None of them was as unattractive as the solar and wind facilities. So what you've done is wonderful in protecting that type of a situation here in Beaufort County. The other thing I want to bring out is a point that we do need to do something with our energy. If you go out and read reports, and with only 3 minutes I can't get really into a lot of detail, but there are literally hundreds of reports that show solar and wind are not going to solve our energy problem in the future. They won't even come close. Part of that is due to the fact they don't work well when it's either not windy or not sunny. The other part of it is the facilities don't last as long as the nuclear and gas facilities do. Those typically have a 40-year life. Most of the solar will tell you they're going to produce for 25. In fact, most of the equipment is only good for about 12 to 15 years. So when they project their ROI, return on investment, you're not going to see it because you're going to have to start replacing panels and replacing equipment and windmills in a much shorter period of time, where you don't do that with the gas and coal and nuclear facilities. They also, when you build these facilities, particularly the solar photovoltaic, most of those components that are chemical parts of it are coming out of China. When they manufacture those, they produce radiation. When they put those on the property, there are off bleeds of chemicals there that are cancerous, and people say that that's a clean energy. I don't find that to be a clean energy. The cost of it can run as much as 25% of, 25 times higher than what we do in our traditional methods of processing and creating electricity through either the traditional gas or the nuclear projects that we do mostly here in North Carolina. So the cost isn't there. It's truly not that clean energy that everybody wants to call it. Okay? I'll end this by pointing out, if solar and wind were really that good, we would not have to have state tax credits, county tax credits, federal grants, and a federal requirement that energy be purchased at a much higher rate than what we can produce it, and that the energy companies must buy it at that rate. We don't have to do all that to a good product. It's only when the product is going to fail on its own, because solar and wind would definitely fail without all the government subsidies. So who's paying for that? We are, the taxpayers of this county. We pay for it by higher taxes and higher energy costs. If you want more information, send me an email on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Is there anyone else? If you will introduce yourself, I think most of the commissioners know, but the audience.
Christina Beasley, and I don't have anything written. I just wanted to say thank you guys for listening to the citizens of Beaufort County and taking this past 11 months or 12 months and really working so hard and listening to us over and over and over again to protect the people of Beaufort County. And this is an amazing county, and we have a lot of resources, and so thank you for listening, and I'm really impressed with the new ordinance, so thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other citizen? Please introduce yourself, even though you don't need an introduction.
My name is Doris Moat. I commend you also for the new ordinance. I see a lot of changes that I think are really good for the county. I have one question. Oh, and I wanted to also say that I think it's a big improvement over what we had before, which is near to nothing. I like the vegetative buffer that you're requiring. I wanted to ask, somewhere in this, I think it was section 6, she spoke about if property sold during the term before the permit was issued, there had to be some things done. Let's say somebody sold the property after the facility is installed, or is there a requirement for changing and getting a new permit, or how's that going to work? Do you understand what I'm saying? Or?
Yes. Yes.
Somebody could tell me that, I'd be happy, and I'll sit down.
All right. Do you have anything else to say on that question?
That's it. That's
Jamie,
it. Thank you.
Or any of the committee members, was that addressed? I'm assuming.
It's addressed.
I may have missed it, but I could.
That was actually meant if the company that owns the solar energy facility changes hands, not if the property that it's located on.
I misunderstood. Thank you.
So there's a lease that goes with that, contract.
Thank you.
Is there any other citizen before we close this?
I'd like to speak.
Okay.
I'm going to go to the stand to speak because I think what I have to say is important. People should think about it. My position on solar power is overall it is a bad thing. Politicians have gotten us into this mess, but it's difficult to deny the citizens of Beaufort County the opportunity to get a very high rent on their land. But there's some things that we need to think about. This ordinance has not been in front of the commissioners to be marked up. And my book says there's going to be a vote on it tonight. So my question to the commissioners, you don't have to answer it now because we'll get into it later on. Are we going to go through this ordinance and mark it up as we traditionally do on any ordinance that comes in front of us, where we go line by line and we go through the ordinance? Because there are a lot of things in here that are really bad. It's good that we have more regulations, but there are provisions of this ordinance that are going to be bad. The second thing is the more restrictive that we make these ordinances to control industry in this county, the more we hurt ourselves with industries that are looking at coming into the county. And if you think for 1 minute industries don't know what the reputation of these various counties are so far as regulation and being able to get along, you're wrong. And this is a very restrictive ordinance, and it's going to hurt even more our ability to recruit industry into this county. The second thing has to do with the more things you put in this ordinance to be enforced, and the planner can't enforce all of this stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here you're going to have to go hire consultants and experts to do. The more restrictive this ordinance is, and the more items that are in here, the more it's going to cost the county to review permits and to do things within the ordinance. And you need to think about that too. We need an awful lot of simplicity to make this thing work. It is too complex, it is too technical, and it is too complicated.
Thank you. Anyone else that would? Myra, will you introduce yourself?
Well, Myra Beasley. As a resident and a property owner in Beaufort County, I would like to commend the commissioners for the effort they have put forward into the new ordinance. I know that it required a lot of meetings. I know there were several meetings with experts that y'all met with, and I appreciate the time and effort. I feel like that it is very good compared to where we were. I'm very thankful that we have this, and I'm a little concerned on the businesses that Mr. Richardson was referring to. I can't imagine what industry maybe would be affected by the solar ordinance, but I do again thank you and appreciate the time that y'all put forth.
Thank you. I think that's Philip Madry standing there at that window. If you will, open that door. You're just in time. Okay. We're getting ready to close it, but you're entitled if you want to say anything, Philip.
I don't know what's been said, but it seems like there's an anti-solar panel.
Introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I'm Philip Madry. I'm a property owner in Beaufort County. I've lived in Beaufort County since 1969. But it seems like to me that for somebody to tell somebody what they can do with their property after they've worked hard to pay for it, they've paid taxes on all those years, and someone comes along and tells them they can't do certain things with it. I think it's unfair to the property owner. I think that property rights have been trampled if they do put restrictions on it. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Philip. Is there anyone else? If not,
Mr. Chairman,
I
have some comments.
Well, you want to save those because we're going right into the vote.
Okay, I'll save it.
Okay. All right. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right. Jamie, just be available. At this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, let me interrupt you there. This is highly irregular. This was put together by a 3-man committee, and it was dumped on the rest of the board a week ago. And no one has had time to review and mark up this ordinance. This board has never done business this way in the past. This is a cram down. If you vote on this tonight, there are issues in this ordinance that are illegal. There are issues in this ordinance that's going to cost the county a lot of money to enforce. So this ordinance needs to be gone through by this board and marked up. I have comments on about every page in here.
Okay. It's my understanding that if we do not have a unanimous vote tonight, we will have a second public hearing in November. Is that
You don't have to have
second vote?
You would have to have a second vote. Statute requires that anything that's of an ordinance in nature requires a unanimous vote by a Board of Commissioners, and without a unanimous vote, it has to come back for a second reading.
But the point is being missed here, that someone is walking in the door with an item and says, vote on this. And you don't know what you're voting on. I'm going to tell you that right now. This is another one of those things like went on in Washington, D.C. We're going to vote on it, and then we're going to read it after we vote on it. We have never done an ordinance of any kind in Beaufort County without the entire board reviewing the ordinance and marking it up, and then it is brought back. Because there are changes to be made in this ordinance. This is an oppressive ordinance. You're going to have a few lawsuits out of this ordinance if you adopt it too. All of that can be avoided, and you can still have essentially what you want. But a cram down like this, I've been on this board 22 years, we have never done this.
Would any of the committee members or general counsel want to speak to any of the comments? Any of the committee members?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the intention of the subcommittee was to recommend an ordinance that, and I'll quote something that Mr. Kidwell stated, was protect the rights of the property owners, both the individual that wants to lease their land or sell their land to a solar energy facility, and also to protect the rights of the individuals that are near or next to a solar energy facility. And this ordinance does that. This ordinance does not prohibit a landowner from selling their land to a solar energy facility or to lease their land to a solar energy facility. The $500 fee, which we've never had a fee before, it's been costing the county, when we have one of these applications, at least $500. We're not making a profit on it. We're charging the applicant what it actually cost us. The planning board, the review, the public hearing. And the other thing we're giving is a public hearing to any property owner in the county that is impacted by one of these solar energy facilities, which is never in there before. The other thing the other ordinance had is that if an individual in this county leases their land to a solar energy facility, and in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you can't find a solar energy facility, the landowner had to clean the property. And a 600-acre solar farm would probably cost the landowner at least $1 million to clean it up. And if that person disappeared, the taxpayer in the county would have to pay that $1 million. And I'm going by today's prices. So the decommissioning plan was put that in there, again, to protect the landowner and the taxpayer of the county, not to stop a solar energy facility. Anybody can come in and put one up as long as they meet the requirements. The design standard, where we put a setback, the last one was 50 feet, so we made it 100 feet, but 300 feet from the nearest design or property owner, building, residential, commercial, institutional. The other thing is the solar panels. We're requiring a vegetative barrier, and that's to beautification. If we want to go down every highway in this county, because we got an lot awful land, and see nothing but panel after panel after panel. They're getting ready to build one in Virginia, which is 15 square miles. How many acres that is? 15 square miles. They have no ordinance. No ordinance whatsoever. So we put in vegetative covering for it. You know, these solar energy facilities get an awful lot of money, as Mr. Kidwell stated. We have to give them tax write-offs. Last year it cost you, the taxpayer, $543,000. When they get done building the 600-acre one, it's going to cost us at least another $1 million, possibly, in tax losses. But we're not stopping it. We never said you can't build it. All we're saying to the residents who want to lease their land or sell their land, or the solar energy facility. Now, if you lease your land or sell your land, the solar energy facility is the one who's to do all these things. And it's not going to stop them because of the money that they're making from taxes, your taxes, federal taxes, state taxes, county taxes. And a lot of these, some of these facilities were built in land that can't even support it because they don't get any sun hardly. But it's because of the tax writers. But here we have a lot of sun, we have a lot of power lines. So those are some of the things that we did. Now, in enforcing it, can the planning board enforce this?
I don't see any reason why the planning department and the planning board couldn't enforce the ordinance.
So all we're talking about, shrubs,
yes,
fencing, solar arrays, which we limit to under 15 feet. Most of them, if you go around, are built about 8 to 10 feet high. So that you could look at land, you could look at the permits or the applications, how high the solar facility things are, whether it meets EPA requirements. Mr. Kidwell also mentioned the toxicity of these things. Some of these coming out of China have fluorochemicals in them. Fluorochemicals leach to Gen X. There's a lot of information now being prepared by Gen X. EPA is beginning to look at Gen X because it can contaminate the water in this county. Because they've had contamination in other parts of the state, in other states within this country. So is everything your office can enforce it?
yes. And we did have the county attorney review the ordinance for legal requirements as well.
Mr. Chairman.
So there's very few differences between the old one and the new one.
Yeah, Commissioner Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just wanted to say that this three-man committee that put this ordinance together worked long and hard at these meetings and at home and looking at different ordinances throughout the county, surrounding areas, and we don't have anything in our ordinance that's not somewhere in these other ordinances. So there's nothing illegal about it. And my main idea for having this ordinance in place is just like Mr. Kidwell said, just like Mr. Buzzo said, was to protect both sides of the property owner. Because I thought that was the most important thing. And we ain't never gonna make everybody happy. Don't even try. But I think we accomplished what we set out to do. And I'd just like to say to Jamie how hard she's worked on this, making sure we made the right moves. And because us three was at an impasse, so to speak, with all this information that we had in front of us. And we were kind of marking time. So Jamie steps in, and in 2 weeks she had everything put in place and took all the information that we gave her and put it together in an ordinance, and it was a beautiful thing to watch it all come together.
Thank you.
And you could also say there was a lot of compromising between the three of us.
Yes, sir.
Any other commissioner? Commissioner Evans?
I was not on the committee, but I came in and sat, and again, I watched them go through the system, and what we had a year ago compared to what we have now, I think we have a good system. And again, I think everything is covered on it. Again, a big issue was property rights. I think that's very important. So from where we were to what we have now, I think we've got a workable system. We can sit here and play with it for 3 more years and spend a lot more money and change a word here and a word there. I think we can kind of clean this thing up maybe down the road. But right now, I think we have a nice, good working document that we can move forward with.
Commissioner Booth, did you?
I served on the committee, and there's some of the things in here that I totally don't agree with. I believe in people having their property rights. But in saying that, after I looked at the surrounding counties and see what they were doing, I knew that Beaufort County had to do something. And that's the reason I made that decision that I would support this ordinance. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we had. Thank you.
Well, I don't have a problem with it per se, but I'm kind of leaning with Commissioner Richardson. I think we need to look at it and that is the way I'm going to vote. I'm not going to say I'm going to vote against it in November, but I want to look at it, and I'll let you know next month.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I want a point of order.
All right.
Once you vote on this thing tonight, you don't have an opportunity to change it. The procedure is that you take the document that's been reviewed and you vote on that document. The second vote is voting on the same document again. If you change it between now and November, then you have to start over again with the procedure. The procedure has always been on an ordinance like this, it's about 20 pages long, is that you don't dump it on me a week before the board meeting, because that's a cram down. And then the board sits down and the board reviews the document and agrees on the language in the document so that you can go forward with the document. I'll give you one example of gross excess. Two things. Number one, on a 600-acre farm, that owner is going to collect about $1 million a year. So if he has to clean it up and it cost him $1 million and it's been there 10 years, he's still doing okay. That's the risk of doing business. It's not up to the government to step into that. And this whole thing is driven by a family squabble up at Terracea, just so you will know. That's what this thing is driven by, because part of the family is getting the money and the rest of them are not. And that's driving this, just so everybody knows. Now, if you have a 600-acre piece of ground, 640 acres is a mile square. Now, why do you need to have a 100-foot setback on the back of this that joins another piece of farmland, and you're going to come off of it 100 feet, and then you've got to plant a row of trees where nobody is? That does not make sense. There's a lot of impracticalities in this. The burden is put on this, saying to the developer, stay out of Beaufort County. Don't come to Beaufort County because we don't want you here. And my problem with all of this is that spills over to other people that want to come to Beaufort County to do business. It affects our reputation, and people are not going to come here when you have this kind of stuff going on where we're going to pick winners and losers, and we don't put together an ordinance to accomplish the basic things, which is whatever protections that you, in your subjective opinion, think that you want to impose on the public. They're not going to come here because we can be subjective and we can go on with stuff like this forever. And we're shooting ourselves in the foot again. Beaufort County does a fantastic job of that. And you're doing it again because you're letting some people in the county who are squabbling among themselves direct an ordinance that's going to hurt you. And we don't need this without it being reviewed. The bad things can be taken out of this ordinance, like requiring 3 miles on a 640-acre piece of land of trees to be planted that are not necessary to be planted. And if the property runs up against another farm where they're farming, tell me that farmer sitting over there driving that tractor is going to be concerned about the aesthetic view on the piece of property next door. The answer is he is not. So we need to use our standard procedure, and I have a severe objection to this ordinance not being reviewed line by line and written up and addressed by this board, because we have never done a cram down since I have been on this board like this.
Would it be agreeable to having a separate working session to address any potential changes?
I don't have a problem with that. Everyone had a chance to read it. I mean, if they want to make some changes, because one person might want to change it, but it take a majority to change it. One person just can't change it. It take a majority. So I don't have a problem if we delay it, let them draw it up, cross it up, read it up, anything they want to do with it. I don't have a problem with them having time to review it.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, two of the things it said, there is a waiver provision that the landowner next to this, when leased it.
For the 300-foot separation requirement from residential commercial.
And the other thing is, if you have an existing vegetative barrier on one side, like a tree line or something, you don't have to put up the
That's right.
vegetation thing.
If it's on the
waiver's
parcel.
already in the thing for the two things that Commissioner Richardson talked about.
No, let me correct you on that. The waiver is only for a residence. It's not a, there's not a provision in here that the adjoining property owner can do a waiver on that 3 miles of fencing and trees. It's only for a residence.
It's for a residential, commercial, or institutional building. It's for the separation requirement from those buildings, but that does not affect the 100-foot separation requirement from the property line.
Which is double what it is now. It's 50 on the current, it's 100 on the building.
Well, you know, and this wildflower requirement should be a suggestion and not a requirement. But one of the most expensive things you can do in reclamation work is to go out and start buying. I do this, so I know. You know, it's not a matter of Hood talking about something he doesn't know about. It's when you have to go and start buying plants, natural plants somewhere, and planting them and keeping them alive. And when you have to find somebody that can sell you wildflower seeds that are natural, you've got a problem. This gets to be a very expensive thing. And these are the kinds of things that I'm concerned about in this ordinance. We don't have any problem growing grass in Beaufort County. As a matter of fact, we got a problem killing grass and getting rid of it in Beaufort County. So why do we need all of these kinds of specialty items in here that are put in here just to restrict and make more expensive on solar farms? Now, keep in mind, solar farms are not good from the standpoint of the politicians in Raleigh and Washington that have taken the money to give people what they want. But we're talking about people in Beaufort County that have an opportunity to make money out of this, more money than they can make farming.
At our national meeting in Nashville, Tennessee, I know that our manager and I think Commissioner Brin, myself, and Commissioner Evans sat in on a national discussion that addresses pretty much everything that's in our ordinance. So, I mean, it pretty well patterns just about everything that's happening in 50 states.
I'd like to make a brief comment of clarification, if I can. The requirement was that they have ground cover to reduce soil erosion. The wildflowers and native grasses was a suggestion, and we refer them to the North Carolina Wildlife publication if they want to go that route and try to be more environmentally friendly. But that part was a suggestion. The only requirement was for some kind of ground cover, which could be standard grass or whatever.
Is there anything in here that cannot be waived by the Board of Commissioners as it relates to the ordinance? I mean, if we have a project that comes in and let's just say it's on a farm that's got 4,000 acres and there's a road that goes back and it's on the back of the farm, and you know, a mile or half a mile from any building or anything, can the planning board not ask us to waive any kind of requirements?
No, everybody would have to meet the requirements of the ordinance. If they wanted a waiver from any requirements of the ordinance, they'd have to apply for a variance, and that would go to the planning board for approval. But there's very strict guidelines from the state statutes that the applicant has to prove to be granted a variance from the ordinance. One of those being that they have to have a peculiar situation with the land involved that prevents them from meeting the requirements of the ordinance. So no, we'd really have to treat everybody the same unless they were able to pass that test to get a variance approved.
Okay. Commissioner Evans?
I don't see how we can approve one set of guidelines and then somebody meets those guidelines and then 2 years later another solar farm comes in and we say he wants to make some changes to it. And say, no, here's the ordinance. I think once we get that ordinance started, we pretty well need to leave it in place unless there's some real big issue.
Mr. Chairman, what you're talking about, where we can waive some of this stuff, now we're slipping over into the good buddy system. If we don't like you, you've got to follow the ordinance. But if you're a good buddy, we're going to make an exception for me. I don't like that. That's offensive to me. And I want to say one more thing about what you're talking about on a waiver. You need to read the language in here that when it comes to the commissioners about what we can do, that is unusually restrictive language that puts the commissioners in a box as to what we can do. We can't do any of that stuff. I haven't seen language like that before. This thing needs to be reviewed before you vote on it.
All right. I'm gonna ask if there is a motion to approve this.
I have a motion that we've put up a work session, and that the commissioners review this line by line, and we come to a final document before we vote on it.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion before we take a vote? All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed?
2-5.
All right. Nay. I'll entertain the motion to. Okay, we got a motion to approve. Is there a second? All right, we have a second. All those in favor of the motion?
No, we got discussion.
All right, well.
You have to have discussion after the second, Mr. Chairman. You know that.
Well, go
You're
ahead.
trying to do your cram down is what you're trying to do.
Go ahead.
Now, and what I'm saying to you before we vote is this is a cram down. We have never had somebody walk in with something like Nancy Pelosi said in Washington, vote for it and you can read it next week. And that's what you're doing here, because these guys that are voting for this don't understand what's in here. They don't understand what it means. I'm in the regulatory business. I do regulatory every day. This is an awful document. It's going to smear the reputation of this county. It's going to blacken the reputation of this county, because what these people admitted they did was we took what was in everybody's ordinance, we added it all up, and we put it into one ordinance. That is not good common sense, and that is not thinking. That is what you said. That is what you said. I heard you. I was here. We don't need to argue about that.
All right.
I finished.
You hear what you want to hear.
Anybody else? Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed? Vote was 5-2. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, as Commissioner Brent said earlier, Jamie did a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir.
I've never seen anything that comes close to this. He really did a nice job.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, to accommodate Commissioner Brin, we move into item number 6, the planning board appointee. Katie?
Yes, sir. We currently have an opening on the Beaufort County Planning Board for a representative from that. We do have 2 people that are interested in that position, Mr. LaCava and Mr. Kyler Jr. And it's up for your consideration to choose one of those or give it more time and see if it.
Okay, if I remember correctly, our procedure when we did the college board and we had 2 nominees, we asked for both of them to be a nomination, and then we took a vote. Okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I like to nominate Mr. Fallon.
Okay, this does not require a second. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Now, we're going to have some discussion after this, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I nominate John LaCava.
All right.
I'm here to speak.
Okay. You're down for the public comment.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Speak.
Any discussion?
Yeah, there's discussion.
All right.
Let me tell the public how this works. That position there has been open for about 3 years, and no one has wanted to fill it. Here's how this thing works to show you how this board operates. Mr. LaCava submitted his application at the 7th of September. On the 27th of September, the last day that you could get it in, Mr. Palin submitted his application. Mr. Palin is a severe political enemy of mine. People on this board went out and recruited Mr. Palin. Gary, why did you move it up to the front? I've sat here with you a long time. I know how you operate, and the more you object, the more guilty you are.
Absolutely.
So I just keep my mouth shut rather than
him.
looking as bad as you're looking.
Yeah, right.
Well, he sat down there for 3 or 4 years, and he never volunteered for this. Now, Palin served on the hospital board, and his service was not distinctive at all. You would not want this man serving on a board. He is a troublemaker, and his character is in question. So, here we go.
Any other comment? All right.
I'll say something on behalf of Mr. Pilot. He served on the Bath Planning Board from 2012 to 2018. And he has manufacturing and regulatory compliance experience. would base my board based upon its...
Yes, the people, the audience can't hear you.
Bring your mic.
Oh.
Bring your mic closer.
In looking at the applications, I see that Mr. Pylan served on the Bath Planning Board from 2012 to 2018. He also has a regulatory background. So I think he would be well qualified for this position. And I, like Gary, have not sought out anybody for this position.
Any other comment? All right. All those in favor of Cava, raise your right hand. All right. All those in favor of Mr. Powell, raise your right hand.
Before I get a chance to speak.
Yes. We're accommodating Commissioner Brand.
Now I know.
Commissioner Brand has asked to be excused after.
Make a motion to excuse Commissioner Brand.
All right, got a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed? All right. Thank you, Commissioner Brand.
Thank you.
All right, we're down to public comments. And the first one on here is Patricia Garrison. And if you will, introduce yourself and 3-minute limit.
Yes, I'm Patricia Garrison. I'm with the Beaufort County Republican Party Executive Committee. During the August County Commissioners meeting, the Republican Executive Committee presented a resolution to the board asking them to reconsider your tax increase. And I have copies here of that resolution if the board members would like to see it to refresh their memory. We are again coming before the board asking the county commissioners to reconsider the tax increases voted on by this board. The citizens of Beaufort County have experienced a devastating hurricane. Private citizens have had damage to their homes, their property, their businesses. There are many businesses that have not reopened, and the date of reopening has not been established. They don't know when they're going to reopen their business. Mr. Chairman, will you present to this board a request to consider revisiting the tax increase, decreasing taxes to the rate that it was previously at prior to your July meeting when you voted to increase the taxes of the Beaufort County citizens? My second question goes to the Board of Commissioners. Will you vote to decrease taxes to relieve the burden of the tax-paying citizens that have been affected by this devastating storm? Are there any commissioners that would vote to decrease taxes? Thank you. The citizens of Beaufort County, you have your answer.
Thank you. All right, the next citizen is John Anderson.
Good evening. My name is John Anderson. I'm here to speak on behalf of my nephew, Corey Anderson. Thank you to the 5 last month who voted on the request for the emergency contact policy from the sheriff, and also to have it added into the county medical plan. Thank you for that. Those of you who don't know, Corey passed away 17 months ago as of October the 8th in the custody of Sheriff Coleman due to a lack of medical care. Since then, we've been looking for answers to why. Why was the family not called by the Sheriff's Department? What is the Sheriff's policy on notification of emergency contacts? when an inmate is hospitalized with a critical or serious illness. Where is Corey's list of emergency contacts that he supposedly filled out when he entered into the jail? After 8 months of stalling and deception by Sheriff Coleman and his department, we came to the board looking for help with questions as to why. Why? There's no reason that we can't get public policy, and the family has a right to know why a family member died from a lack of medical care while in the custody of the sheriff. In February, the county attorney stated that he had been assured that we had received a copy of this policy. Not true. That's why we're still here 17 months later. The sheriff also appeared in February stating that he had policies on most everything. So if he's got policies on most everything, why don't we have the policy on contacting or the notification of emergency contacts? Fast forward up to tonight. Now we know that the policy on notification can be put into the jail's medical plan by the County Board of Commissioners according to the state statutes. This was voted on and passed in the last meeting by 5 of the 7 members of the board. Let's move forward by the authority that you have and have this policy added as part of the medical plan now before this happens to another inmate. My brother and my family have suffered enough. Simply put, this is the right thing to do. Any family who's lost a family member, I'm sure, would be requesting for the same thing to take place. It's time to put this to rest. We've had enough of politics by the sheriff and by his department. To the 5 of you who voted last time, again, thank you for your support. I pray that you'll support tonight when this issue comes back up. To the 2 of you who did not support it, I pray that you'll have a change of heart and a change of mind. If not, I pray that the people of Beaufort County will see that you're more interested in yourself than you are the people of this county. I will not stop. I will be back until this issue is resolved and we have some closure. Thank you for your opportunity to speak tonight, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, we're moving into items for consent. Is there any item that you would like to have moved to further discussion?
I'd like to know more about item 1.
Hold on a second.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Perry, were you here for public comment?
Okay.
I had 3 names and.
He said he's not.
All right. Any items under items for consent that you would like to have moved for discussion?
I'd like to move item number 1.
Okay. That'll be moved for under items for decision.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
If at all possible, I don't know if Ann's got some folks with her about that. If you could, if it's possible, I don't know how long she's going to be here, but could you have that and then discuss that right afterwards? Because Ann can certainly answer the question.
Yes, we can do that. We can do that. Is that the only item?
That's the only one I've have.
All right. Can I have a motion to approve the other items for consent? Got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor of approving the items for consent other than number 1, raise your right hand. Those opposed? All right. And to accommodate Ann and Rodney, would you come up here and address any questions that Commissioner Richardson has?
Sure.
Well, let's have one quick question on item number 1. As I understand it, we're getting a $28,000 grant.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the matching funds for that grant, are there matching funds?
Any of my budgeted line items, such as salaries, will cover anything that's a required match. So we're asking for 100% no money from you.
There's no money from the county, no additional money from the county. Okay, that's all I have on that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion to approve.
All right, got a motion to approve, second.
Second.
All right, second. All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Okay, thank you. All right, we're down to items for discussion, and the first one is the Hurricane Florence recovery Carney. Here again, thank you very much. We'll pay you after the meeting.
I'm going to pay him right now. Thank you, Chairman and Board. Charles Tripp is the professional working the light switch tonight. And as we go into our response and the recovery phase that we're in now of Hurricane Florence, Charles is our Area 2 coordinator from the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management under Department of Public Safety. And I just want to say thank you to him publicly in front of you guys. He has been excellent in getting us set up from the time that I have come into the county and Chris has come into the county, in helping us in preparedness and also in this response mode, and now helping us as well going into the recovery stage. We just want to tell him thank you publicly because he's done us a great job. With that, I forgot the microphone. As you take a look at this, we'll try to be brief in it, but let you know, we have prepared for many things. I will say everything that Chris has come up with an idea to prepare in emergency management has happened. So we're going to ask him not to throw anything else new out. Because everything he throws, it seems like that event comes for us next. But when they first showed the change of this storm on the map, we hadn't seen any prior spaghetti, from the weather forecast to say that there was any precedent of a storm making this kind of rotation. So we continued to prepare for the worst. As you know, it was a Cat 4 saying that was coming into our area. We were very fortunate. We thank God that did not come to us in Beaufort County. We do have some damage, but nowhere near what it could be. I'm going to go through this presentation pretty much looking at the phases of emergency management itself. Before Hurricane Florence got here, of course, there was preparedness. We had our response, which for Beaufort County went really quick, over about 36 hours. We were probably one of the first counties with real damage to go into a recovery mode, while other parts of our state were still in a response. And of course, we're still under mitigation from previous storms, but will be from this storm as well. Chris and I believe very strong on the 5 Ps, as you see up here, that we've got to have proper planning to make sure we have a plan for things that are coming so we can function under that plan. And this was a good example of putting those plans in motion. Things went really well. I throw this slide up. I'm out of diagrams and out of space to say in the planning piece, before Hurricane Florence was here all the way back to 2017, we started the planning process of response. And it's really all of those agencies you see up there. You see Beaufort County as a big symbol in the middle. Absolutely every department we've had in the county helped prepare for this. We had training this year that department heads went to and other members of their department in incident command system operating in the EOC and under that environment. We just had a great response from the county as a whole and even outside agencies in preparing. And from that, going into the response mode itself, these agencies, everyone that you see up there on the board, did just an astronomical job. I would like to say thank you to our county staff from each department. All of those staffs leaving their primary job in the event of the emergency, being able to come in, and we operate the Emergency Operations Center in the way it was handled. And if I tried to name per name, I'd be in trouble for that. So let me just say all of our staff. I would like to say a special thank you to Mark Doan with the Beaufort County Schools. Excellent to work with. He and his staff in every way helped us with the shelters, from feeding people in the shelters to open shelters, the principals, the staffs and things in there. And also Jim Linson with the North Carolina Forestry Service, our Beaufort County group. He came in and helped us in operations, and his group set up a central receiving and distribution and did a phenomenal job with that. So I want to say thank you to all of these agencies you see and our personnel that helped with it. Chris is going to go over our response and entering into our recovery, and I'll finish with mitigation.
Thank you, Director Hedgepeth. So looking at the impacts that we received here in Beaufort County, as Director Hedgepeth just mentioned, and we have discussed in previous meetings, we received some very favorable changes in that last 36 hours as Florence approached our coast. The Monday of that week, we were expecting a blunt force hit from a Category 4 storm. In those last 36 hours, there was a lot of answered prayers on our part and some favorable changes to Beaufort County. What that resulted in for us was about 5 to 10 inches of rain across the county, depending on where you were. We had consistently 7 to 10 feet of storm surge along the Pamlico River. Most of our county experienced sustained winds between 20 and 45 miles per hour. We did have some higher gust in places, but sustained winds stayed in that 20 to 45 area. Our greatest impact was actually floodwaters, and that was to the Aurora, Belhaven, Chocowinity, Pamlico Beach, Washington areas. Those areas that are prone to those types of floodings, and that's exactly where we saw it in this case. As is the case for many of our weather events in Beaufort County, the river seems to be the dividing magic line for us, where in the past, whatever event that we might be faced weather-wise, the river has always divided us north and south in the elements that we experience. And that was the case on this event as well. There was a drastic difference from what the citizens of Aurora and Blunt's Creek experienced versus what the citizens of Old Ford and Pinetown experienced. We were just fortunate in that southern track in the way the bands entered across our coast and the impacts we felt as a result of that. So in our response, as Director Hedgepath mentioned, we did have a full EOC activation. And as he also mentioned, this has been a lot of planning and meetings with department heads over the past month, the past year. But what we found in this EOC activation is we had department heads or critical decision makers in the room at the EOC, and that was critical for us. We're going to talk about some of the challenges and busyness that we saw during those EOC activations, but had we not had all those individuals in our EOC as those real-time elements were happening to make real-time decisions, our outcome would have been drastically different. So just can't say enough about all the staff members who helped us in that EOC component. We were operating 2 shelter locations, one at P.S. Jones and one at Washington High School. We did have a central distribution point staff. That was actually the IRB building off of Page Road. Great location, served us well during the event and continues to serve us well in the recovery phase. All of our local first responder, law enforcement, and public works staff were involved at some point during our response. From an outside agency, and meaning out beyond Beaufort County and in many cases beyond North Carolina. We had an 88-member USAR team from New Jersey that was staffed very heavy for water response. They had 6 boats and 2 high-wheeled vehicles, and at one point we had all of them operating in Beaufort County, really within the city of Washington at one point. We also had a 45-member water rescue team from Arizona. We had a 4-ambulance strike team from Orange County, Florida. That was four paramedic-level ambulances and 1 SUV or QRV that accompanied them. And we also had an EOC overhead team from the state that helped us in our EOC functions locally. To give you kind of a perspective of just how busy our EOC was, Friday morning about 2:30 was the start of what would have been the height of our response. That started with a structure fire in the Bunyan area in which several fire departments responded mutual aid. Now, imagine a full working structure fire in the heat of our hurricane elements. And that's what our departments were dealing with to start this morning off. As those units were working that particular incident, the city of Washington began to get calls for rescue in their downtown area. At that point, the USAR team from New Jersey and all of their water assets were dispatched to the city of Washington. The city of Washington staff coordinated that response. At one point, they were pulling out about 100 people an hour from the downtown area. All total, just the fire department accounted for 260 water rescues. That does not count what Washington PD was able to pull out on their vehicles. So this occurred between 2:30 and 10 o'clock that morning. When we mentioned Mark Dolan, the school system, and their support, we actually had school buses running shuttle routes so that when the fire department personnel were pulling people out of those areas, they were loaded on school buses and carried to our shelter location. During that same time, we had multiple water rescues from the Belhaven area. A number of individuals were brought out using the Sheriff's Department high water vehicles as well as Belhaven PDs. We had our second shelter opened at P.S. Jones. By 10 o'clock that Friday morning, we had 770 evacuees in our two shelters, in addition to about 200 responders or staff that we had housed in some of those same buildings. We were also challenged with numerous primary roads that were divided by flooded water. Our normal access down 264, for example, into Belhaven and Pantego was restricted in several places, and we actively had deputies and ambulance EMS personnel trying to find routes around those areas, predetermined in the event we had a response that we had to get people back to the hospital. At one point that morning, Belhaven Fire Department, Pamlico Beach Fire Department, and Pantego Fire Departments had water inside their stations. Sydney Fire Department was dry but could not access any of their fire units, and Washington Station 1 was evacuated. And also during this same 2:30 to 10 o'clock time frame, Beaufort Vinant Hospital reported having 2 generator failures at their facility. They were down to essential power only, and we were actually talking about evacuations of a hospital. So when we say that having those critical people, those decision makers in our EOC to deal with challenges that were in real time and make real decisions, this is what happened in a matter of hours just in one of those operations period. And these are things that the public will very probably never see unless we mention it. This is how busy it was. This was the work that people were putting forth to keep everybody safe. As we move into a recovery phase, and I can run through these fairly quickly, our biggest goal, one, is naturally to maintain critical infrastructure. This particular challenge was tasked to Christina Smith, who did an outstanding job. But all power was restored to our county by 9/22. It was a Saturday afternoon. Our biggest holdup on that was Duke Power for some of our southern county pieces. Our disaster assessments were completed by our first responders. As soon as it was safe for them to get out, we started getting assessments of damaged areas and where some of those challenges might be. Our goal was to get our shelters, our people transitioned from shelters back home safely. And we were able to complete that within a few days of the storm impacting us on Tuesday the 18th. We established several pods throughout our recovery phase, mainly in Aurora, Belhaven, Chocowinity, Sydney, and Washington. Those were staffed for several days before they were brought to a conclusion by request of those municipalities. We continue to coordinate our VOAD efforts through Virginia Baptist Men. They are still active in that role and still coordinating that piece for us countywide. We had conversations with SDR and establishing or pulling the trigger on our debris contract pickup piece and removal piece. That contract is undergoing a FEMA evaluation to make sure that it is still compliant, and we hope to have that in place in the coming days. Through our partners at FEMA and NCEM, we have individual and public assistance teams currently working. We have a disaster recovery center that's open at the Andrews building. We also have a small business administration that will be setting up in that DRC as well. As we look more long-term, this is some of the phase pieces that we're currently moving into as a detailed damage assessment and cost analysis. We've got some very basic initial damage assessments, but dollar signs aren't attached to them. These detailed damage assessments will provide us with the numbers of what it cost us to have a response, the values of properties that have been damaged, and so forth, and that will be an ongoing process in the coming weeks. We continue to work with the COG on all of our recovery activities, and right now we have an initial deadline or completion goal of debris removal for November 1st, and we look okay to stay on that point as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Director Hedgepath to talk about the mitigation phase.
So really looking at mitigation is where we're going from here as we have the recovery center open and individuals being able to seek assistance, going for their FEMA assistance, and great volunteer resources coming in and being able to link up with those. We'll look at this total incident from all the responders, all those that helped, and that's from the local fire and EMS to our law enforcement and absolutely everyone that was a part. We saw some changes that needed to be done in our emergency operations plan before this storm actually came, and we went ahead and put those in place. But we'll be evaluating to see if there's anything else we need to tweak. And then looking at the properties themselves for mitigation. I think you guys know for sure how long a mitigation process works. We are still raising houses from Irene. You know, those funds still coming in, a long process. But we'll be identifying new homes for mitigation, especially those homes that had repeat losses over these last storms. So we'll just keep that coordination up. We will be doing this for months, if not a couple of more years, from Hurricane Florence itself. So just brief where we've been and where we are, where we hope to be, and be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Charles, will you turn those lights on? Will you introduce Charles again, since the lights were off when you did that?
Sure. He doesn't like being introduced in the light. No, yeah. Charles Tripp, Area 2 Coordinator with the North Carolina Department of Emergency Management, and a great resource to Beaufort County. We thank him for it.
Thank you for being here, Charles.
I did one the other day. I'll do it again. I'd like to do a big shout out to Carney and Chris, the job they did. I got an opportunity to go out to the EOC when the heat was really turning on, and to see these guys operate. If you will, everybody in here, if we would have taken move up, this is the room they were operating, the size of the room. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's trying to communicate emergency situations. First responders coming in, people standing outside trying. But these guys pulled it off. They commanded those guys' attention. It got done. It was, again, a big shout out to you guys. Y'all did one heck of a job under a very difficult situation.
We'd just like to reiterate the team concept of absolutely everybody in.
Well, you had a good team.
Yes, we did. Thank you. Any others?
Jim.
Yes.
The Emergency Operations Center. How did that facility work out in during the hurricane?
The roof stayed on, the air conditioning stayed going. So that's two good things. It's just the size. It's having that many people come together in coordination. We tried not to even have briefings in there because we couldn't brief and then turn back over into the center itself. And as we were moving to an operations board in the hallway, there's people that are walking through when you're trying to do very direct operations. So we need space. There's no doubt about that. It was very tight in what we were doing, but we did the best we could with what we had, and we did a good job. And I would just like to say a special thank you. I've worked disasters in several places at governments, from city to county to state government. And Manager Alligood, having him with us inside and being able to make real-time decisions without slowing down, very active, great resource and help in that. And I don't want to leave him out in that. He was great to have in. Never had management at that level be side by side with us and making decisions and moving forward.
Well, that's why he was hired. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to maybe put on the agenda, we should put on the agenda for November, where yourself and the Vice Chair, maybe in conjunction with Carney and Brian, maybe put together a study committee to study the Emergency Operational Center, to see what improvements can be made, if any, some of the things to look at. We lucked out. This could have been a 4 or 5, but I think a lot of prayers were answered because we would have had devastation like we've never seen probably before. So I think I'm going to put, with your approval, I think I'll add that to the agenda for a discussion and possibly a study group.
November.
Okay, yeah, November. And I also want to thank Carney, you and your staff, the sheriff, and Coleman and his staff, Brian, all the first responders, the EMS, the fire departments, everybody really stepped up and went way beyond. And thank you.
Thank you,
Chair.
Yes.
I can't resist. I got to do it.
All right.
There would have been a new EMS center had they not killed the facility we were trying to build. That was part of the process. Everybody was hollering about stop the jail, but there was so much other attached to that facility that, yeah, now we're paying for it.
Mr. Chairman, I just can't resist either. I have to have a say.
All right.
Well, you know, this is a facility that you've used once in 3 years, 2 or 3 years, and within 300 feet of it, there's probably a 22,000-foot modern building. There's no reason that you have to have an EMS center sitting there waiting just in case something happens. We have plenty of buildings with the 5 Ps can be done to give these people the facilities that they think they need to do this. I was in the operations center virtually every day, and it was not, well, it wasn't bad conditions, but everybody was close together, but everybody was doing their job, and everybody was being successful, and the management was doing its job. So I'm not going to support a $4 or $5 million building that may be used once every 3, 4, or 5 years. Don't forget, we've been as long as 10 years without a hurricane hitting, and this is what we have these people hired for, not to sleep, but to be ready when this thing comes and to know where they're going to go to do it. And again, within 300 feet of where they were, there is a building that will provide all the facilities they will ever need, and it is definitely will not be used during one of these emergencies. So why do you want to go out and spend this money?
Any other comment? Thank you, Carney. Thank you, Chris. And thank you to our light switch.
Commissioner Richardson, thank you for noting that we did not sleep.
And also thanks to our county manager Brian Allagood. Most of the commissioners had a chance to sit in on the last department head on Tuesday at 1 o'clock before Florence was supposed to actually hit the next day. And we did not receive good news that day from Carney, and yes, prayers must have been answered because we did dodge a Category 4 coming up to Pamlico River. We're down a little after 7 o'clock, so we're going to take our break at this point, and we'll be back in 15 minutes.
I thought it was too.
Okay, we're down to items for discussion. Item number 2 is the flood maps update. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, I just asked the manager to provide us with an update. Have the proper documents that were supposed to be submitted in September been submitted?
I had a conversation, members of the board, I had a conversation with Randy Munt, who is the outreach coordinator for the risk management section of the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. He said that due to the hurricane, they have been put about 3 weeks behind. They are hoping to have preliminary map revisions out by the end of October, so the end of this month. There'd be a 30-day review period until the end of November with a final letter of determination they hope from FEMA by January of 19, and then the effective date of summer of 19. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
She's asleep.
All right. Item number 3 is the approval of the jail medical plan. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, this at the last commissioners meeting, this motion was made. Commissioner Richardson moved that we summon the medical plan for the jail and that we insert in the medical plan that the sheriff shall notify when an inmate is admitted to the hospital and shall notify the appropriate people, the designated people, and Commissioner Brin seconded that motion. The vote was 5-2. And my question to the manager is, has the sheriff submitted any language having to do with his policy on notifying when a prisoner is admitted to a hospital?
The letter was written to the sheriff's office, and we're waiting on their response.
I believe you said the letter would go out the second day after the last meeting.
I don't think it went out the second day after last meeting. I had conversation with the chief deputy about it after the meeting, and then I sent them a letter after that, but they have the letter.
When do you expect to get an answer?
That was a question that was asked in the letter, and so I'm not sure.
You have not received a... This is typical of our sheriff. He keeps telling us he can do what he wants to, and so far he's getting away with it. He's doing what he wants to. Now, let me mention two things here that go on with this. I asked for a copy of the County Detention Center medical plan be presented. It has been presented here. This medical plan has been signed by the sheriff in 10/5 of 17 and by the county health director 10/3 of 17. Now, the general statutes in North Carolina say that the medical plan has to be approved by the governing board. I've been here 22 years. I have never seen the medical plan brought before the board for approval. That's neither here nor there because I've seen a whole lot of other things that were supposed to be brought to the commissioners that were never brought to the commissioners. So what I would say to the commissioners is this. There are two issues here. There is the notice to be given when the inmate is admitted to the hospital. And then there's the issue of visitation after that. So I think what we should do tonight is we should go ahead and insert that language. The sheriff's had 30 days to respond. He hasn't responded, which we voted to do. The resolution that I just read said it was going to be inserted in there. And what it needs to be is two sentences. The first sentence should say that the sheriff shall notify upon the admission to the hospital. And the second sentence needs to say that visitation shall be contingent upon security conditions that are to be determined by the sheriff. And that covers the problem. So I will make a motion that we insert into this plan that I just gave you the dates of, those two sentences, and that we approve the entire document, which is on page 130 and 131, and then Beaufort County is in compliance with the law. Because we're not in compliance with the law right now.
If you will, step up there, Chief Rice.
Just, I guess, before you get to a point where there's a second and discussion and vote, I've spoken with the sheriff at length, in reference to the medical plan. I also spoke to my former sheriff, and he doesn't remember the medical plan coming before the board, and he was sheriff for 16 years before Sheriff Coleman was. I have noticed that in the statute, I say that you are accurate in that. It's the time now that the medical plan is to be drafted. My recommendation would be, or just something to throw to the board, would be allow the jail administrator and the health director to draft the plan. You've been provided with a copy of the plan that was signed off in October of 2017. We present the board with a plan, and then just like you were mentioning earlier in one of your comments, that you wait until you actually see the document, and then you mark it up. And if there's anything to discuss or anything that needs to be added, then we can bring it back at another meeting before so it can be approved.
Can we expect language that's similar to what I just said, the two sentences that I just said, to be in the plan when it's presented by the sheriff?
I believe that any discussion is on the table when it comes to the medical plan.
Well, the easiest thing for the commissioners to do to get this thing over with is to go ahead and second the motion that I just made, and then the sheriff has the language that goes into the plan when he presents it. And if he wants to change that language, he is certainly at liberty to change the language. But when he presents it in November, the November the 1st meeting. That way we avoid all of this go back and forth, and maybe it's going to happen and maybe it won't happen, and we're waiting on somebody else. And I appreciate what you said, Chief Deputy, but I think that will solve our problem. That we vote on the language now. It can be changed if the sheriff so desires when he presents the jail medical plan for the approval of the county commissioners. So my motion is still there.
Since we have our health department head here, I'm assuming that you guys are fairly close to redoing the medical plan between now and the end of the year.
Yes. It's time now for the plan to be drafted. After it's drafted by the jail administrator, then conversations are had with the director of health, and it's turned over to him to sign, and then after his approval, then we can bring it before the board for discussions and amendments as needed.
Well, are we changing what we just said when the chief deputy said that we would have the new plan at the November meeting? You're stretching it out to the first of the year, Mr. Chairman.
I'm not stretching it out. I just, because this is dated October, that as soon as you able to do that.
I mean, we can send a draft copy once it's completed and ready to be signed. We can send a draft copy, but I'm just trying to be as easygoing with Commissioner Richardson's wanting to be as open with the public as much as he can and talk about as much of this in public meetings as opposed to discussing things in draft copy between them.
Well, the plan's not going to change that much because this plan right here is written based upon the language that's in the general statute. So it's not going to be that different. It's not going to be changed that much. So I can't see where you're going to be reinventing the wheel with this. We're just inserting a paragraph in here.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? If not, it dies.
So what are we going to do now? Does nothing happen at this point in time? What's the remedy for this situation? Because the board has voted to insert this into the plan. Can we expect that the sheriff is going to honor the wishes of the board in the resolution that was passed by a vote of 5-2? And, you know, let me say this other thing. The sheriff should have the courage and the guts to appear before this board instead of sending somebody else that's second in command. You know, I would like to see Ernie Coleman standing right here talking to us instead of sending somebody that can't really give us a good answer because he doesn't know what Ernie is going to do next. Now, can we expect Sheriff Coleman to honor the wishes of the Board of County Commissioners and have this language in the plan?
The sheriff will present a medical plan.
See, he can't answer because he doesn't know what the sheriff is going to do, and the sheriff doesn't have the courage to come before this board and stand here and tell us, give us an honest, straightforward answer. Politics. This is a terrible situation. It was started by the last sheriff, and this board let him get away with it. I move that this board requests that the sheriff appear before the board instead of sending an employee to represent him. Do I get a second? I don't think so because you guys are covering for the sheriff.
Is there a second?
I don't think you've got the guts to second it. Not a man on the board. Not a single man on the board.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I say a few words?
Yes.
You know, I used to tell my staff when you can't get along with one person, maybe it's that person. But when you can't get along with a second person or a third person, then there's usually something wrong with the person.
This is politics, Commissioner Buzz.
Yes, it is.
This is not a little club that you control. Politics. I don't have to answer to anybody. Your minions, your employees that reported to you were under your thumb. Let's get into the real world now and stop covering for the sheriff.
When you attack another elected official, it's very unprofessional. And the only
No, it's
reason
not unprofessional.
Can I have the floor?
Yeah, you can have it, but you need to start telling the truth, and you need to get in the rest of the world with the rest of us.
Would you please allow him to finish?
Like talking to a 2-year-old. The medical plan right now meets section 153A-225.
Yes, the medical plan is in compliance with the statutes.
Okay.
No, it's not.
And
it is not. It hasn't been approved by this board. Again, Commissioner Buzzio, you're misleading the public. Because you guys are lying.
Will you let Commissioner Buzzio finish, and then I'll go back to you.
Okay,
Mr. Rich.
Fair enough.
Mr. Madden, I have a question for you, if I may. In your service expansion business plan, there's a section in here, D, that covers the jail health program, correct? And this was presented by the board to the board when? 2017? I mean, 2017, 2016? So in here it talks about the expansion plan. Did we approve this expansion plan when it was presented to us back in 2017?
Yes, sir, but clarify that it's not a medical plan. So
We'll call it the Jail Health Program. Data program activity proposed February 2016. Target date for implementation July 17. And I got a slew of minutes here from 17. In those minutes, we talk about the plan. Correct? And we talk about these addition of the appendix. Correct. And talks about addresses the Beaufort County strategic plan. It talks about the services that will be afforded the jail, about billing and things like that. Okay, but is it the full plan that includes these 5 issues?
No, sir.
Okay.
It's not official jail medical plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right. Anybody else for Commissioner Richardson?
Let him have it.
All right.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we still haven't settled anything. This thing is just what it was, the same thing that it has been all along, is you leave the meeting and nobody knows what anybody is supposed to do. So what is going to happen here? When are we going to get the medical plan presented, and is the sheriff going to comply with the wishes of the board when we voted 5-2? We just need an answer.
We do have a medical plan in place.
There's a medical plan in place, but I will flat out say that Commissioner Richardson is correct, that I can't find one that has been presented to the board. The only thing that I can do, since I don't have a time machine in my pocket, is to make sure that once the draft is put before the board, that it's put before for approval.
So you're saying that we're going to have a chance to approve the next one?
Yes.
Which will be in the November meeting. Is that correct?
I have no problem seeing that there will be a plan that's presented to the board at the November meeting. And then it'll be the prerogative of the board whether you approve it that night or whether there's some amendments or changes or anything that needs to be made, and then we can do that at the appropriate time.
Okay.
One other question, if I may.
Yes.
Will that plan also include the security concerns?
I mean, once again, I guess the thing that I've got here is, can't we wait to be disappointed in what we see until we actually see it?
Okay.
You know, and you know, so I'm not trying to be anything but truthful on that, and that's to Commissioner Richards' question as well.
Well, the sheriff does have, in fairness, the sheriff does have policy that has to do with security and how security is to be handled and who's supposed to do what when which happens in the jail. That's already set out.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
You're very welcome.
And you're excused because I know you have another engagement. All right. We're down to item number 5, the Finance Committee update. Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee did meet on September the 18th at 3 o'clock p.m. The members present were Commissioner Langley, Commissioner Brin, and Chairman Waters. Under old business, the committee completed its review of the county purchasing policy. The committee recommendations will be brought to this full board at the November meeting for their approval. Under new business, the travel expenses for the prior 3 months for the manager and commissioners were reviewed and approved. It just so happened that our auditor, Jeff Best, was on site beginning his field work for the audit, and so I invited him to attend the meeting with me, and he gladly did that. And while he was at the meeting, he let the committee know that his group had completed a big part of the compliance testing at DSS, but they had a little more to do in that area. And they were pretty much just getting started with the financial piece of the audit. The dates were determined for the quarterly meetings for next year. They are March 19th, June 18th, September 17th, and December 17th. And that's always on a third Tuesday in those months. There is one more Finance Committee meeting this year, which is on December the 18th at 3 o'clock p.m. in this room. Glad to have anyone that wishes to attend join us. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Anita? All right, we'll move to items for decision. The first one, the water bill adjustment. Sandra sent me a text and said that she would like to be moved to the November, so she'll be here in November. Down to item number 2, the Community Development Block Grant. Brian, are you going to do that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. In and out. I assume you you don't need me to read it again from the public hearing?
No.
So what we do is request a motion to close out the grant and authorize.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion to close it out and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and we've handled item number 3, so we're down to item number 4, the Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund grant acceptance. Ann?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Beaufort Soil and Water Conservation District has been awarded a grant in the amount of $147,855.58 through the North Carolina Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. The grant funds will be used to assist a local landowner with the establishment of a perpetual conservation easement on the family's working farm, a farm of approximately 159 acres. The conservation easement will ensure that the farm will forever remain a working farm. The district intends to apply for additional grant funds through the USDA Agricultural Land Easement Program to supplement the purchase price of the conservation easement and to satisfy any required grant match. Through the services of district staff members, the USDA ALE grant, and other fees to be provided by the landowner, Beaufort County will experience no cash outlay associated in acquiring the conservation easement, and 100% of the required grant match will be satisfied. The Beaufort Soil and Water Conservation District's Board of Supervisors has approved participation in this grant project and recommends to the Board of County Commissioners that they accept the Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund Grant Award through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, contingent upon receipt of a second grant award through the USDA ALE.
I have a question.
Yes.
This last part you said that the one is coming from North Carolina and one is coming from USDA. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So if you don't get the one from USDA, you don't get the one from North Carolina.
We could get it, but we will not go through with it.
Okay. But all this is pending getting those two pieces together.
It's pending on getting the second grant.
I make a motion we approve it.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I wonder if the maker of the motion would be willing to amend his motion to say that we approve it, provided that there's no expense to the county.
You said that already.
Yes, sir.
She said that.
Yeah, but it's not in the motion. What she says goes into the minutes. What you say in the motion becomes law. What I want to do, I want to bind this thing so that it's not going to cost the county any money. That's all.
Well, you can get that opportunity when they come and ask you for some.
Well,
but I will amend the motion. I will amend it.
We never need to get to that point. Thank you.
Okay. So, all right, we'll get a second.
Will a second? I'll second it if Jerry was not willing to amend his second.
Okay.
I second it.
All right, with that amendment.
Thank you.
So we don't have to write a check, Ann?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Will not be.
All right.
We're good.
All those in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rodney. All right. Item number 5 is the request for the presentation of the final audit from the Hospital Authority Board. Commissioner Richards.
Well, I have not seen the audit that was supposedly done before the hospital board was disbanded and disclosed of, so I asked Commissioner Buzzio to present that to the board. I got an email, I think, with the audit in it today, or the final report, which is not really technically an audit, but it's about as close as we can get without spending a lot of money for nothing.
Actually, I did present a copy way back in 2017.
You did?
2017, yeah. But not till, I think, maybe one copy. We had a quick discussion, but I'm glad that you got the
Well, it should be presented to the board.
Yeah. When you were chairman, you did an audit, or not an audit, or a financial review.
Same kind of a thing.
Same kind of thing, because we didn't want to spend a lot of money.
Right.
And I think the quote was close to $20,000.
No, 14,000.
14.
But we had from 2011. We had about 5 or 6 years to go through, and a lot of.
From September 1st, 2011, to August 4th, 2015.
Yeah.
So the board approved a similar type of financial review for the period of time August 2015 through November 2017. And they looked at, they examined deposits, which was procedure 1, and they examined the deposits and found on the check register and matched those to the bank statements and verified that the amounts were correct. And this was from Wilson, Jones, and Griffin. I should mention that, CPAs. They examined the checks written for accuracy and related invoices associated with the checks. They looked for any difference in amounts from the invoice and cleared check. We also matched the payment on the check with what was on the invoice and the check register. They did not find any discrepancies. Number 3, the foot register for accuracy. We footed the register for any mathematical errors and found none. Procedure 4, calculated the ending balance. We calculated the ending balance and found a difference of less than $12 from the reconciled balance in the check register and the bank balance. It appears that this amount is where interest was not recorded in the check register, causing this incorrect amount due to the size of the account, and the amount of this discrepancy was our judgment. This was immaterial, and no additional procedures were done to determine the ending balance. They scanned the general ledger for unusual items. Our scan did not uncover any items that we felt to be unusual or not within the scope of Beaufort County Hospital Authority Board purpose. Procedure 6, they scanned each monthly bank statement, canceled checks, and deposit slips for unusual items. No unusual items were noted that are not included in other procedures. Those items include unusually large deposits and withdrawals. The procedures we performed did not constitute an audit or a review made in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted to the United States of America, and consequently no assurance is expressed. Had we performed additional procedures, other matters may have come to our attention and would have been reported to you. That's a general statement and everything. Management is responsible to Beaufort County Hospital Authority's internal control over compliance with policies and procedures developed for these matters. This report is intended solely for the information and use of the Board of Directors, and management of the Beaufort County Hospital Authority is not intended to be or should not be used by anyone other than these specific parties. And the other thing, we had a CFO who was not a voting member of the Hospital Authority who handled the reconciliation, same as you had. The process was the attorneys would receive an invoice, or I would receive an invoice. We would pass that on to the attorneys. The attorneys would draft a document that had to be signed by the county manager and myself, and that went from the attorneys, went back to the attorneys and went to the bank. The bank cut the checks, and we didn't handle any checks or cash. So that's the audit, and everybody has the one from 2011 to 2015 and the latest from 2015 to 2017.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7. All I was able to write down in haste was Wilmington.
Yeah.
That's the one you want to add.
This is about the federal subpoena that was issued by the federal grand jury in Wilmington, having to do with illegal voting, with people who should not be voting that were actually voting. And they issued a broad-based subpoena, which I agree with should be skinned down, because there's for 40-something counties in eastern North Carolina, and it appears at first as though what they were wanting was the actual records and the actual ballots and all of this kind of stuff. And the truth of the matter is they can do their job with a lot less information. Now, one of the things that's going on is, number one, this issue hasn't come before these commissioners, and we're one of the counties that received a subpoena, and it should come before the commissioners. What I'm concerned about is there's I understand from the county attorney, and he's certainly welcome to weigh in on this, that the Wake County is providing the lead on this, and here's the direction the lead is going in, to quash the subpoena. Now, I'm against that. There is enough illegal voting going on out there of people who should not be voting that this needs to be investigated. And I think that this board should consider a resolution that says we do not support quashing the subpoena. We support reconfiguring the subpoena to a practical form and go forward with that, because as long as we sit here on our hands, these people in Wake County are going to lead us down the garden path trying to get this subpoena quashed, and the investigation of illegal voting will go away when that happens. Well, I am one of the people, and I realize there are a lot of people who say the complete opposite. There are a lot of people that are double voting. There is illegal voting. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be put to rest. So with that, I make the motion that Beaufort County, as a resolution, that to be sent to Wake County, which is apparently the lead agency on this, that Beaufort County does not support quashing the subpoena, that Beaufort County does support reconfiguring the subpoena to a more practical format.
David, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would. I'll try to fill in some of the blanks here. This case was presented to the U.S. District Court, to the grand jury, alleging that certain persons with illegal, bogus documents, for whatever reason, had voted in some elections in eastern North Carolina. There were, I think it was 45 counties that received the same subpoena that we received. We understand that there were a grand total of 19 arrests made in all of those counties, and those folks were incarcerated. The subpoena was issued and served on the counties, requiring voluminous voting documents, and given to September the 25th to turn up those documents, which was just an extreme impossibility. Now, we know from law school, as a matter of fact, a motion to quash is the only way to test the subpoena, and that was where we ended up in these phone conferences that we had on this thing. There is no other way on the subpoena. So you file a motion to quash, and you see whether it is a legal subpoena or not. There is a good argument that it is not, that this is contrary, that what they have requested is contrary to North Carolina law, and that it would be prohibited by law. So the thought was that we need to get this before a federal judge who will look at the whole situation and either quash the subpoena completely, or if they're able to bring about some type of a situation that Beaufort County can live with, or that all the other 45 counties can live with, then we will do so. We've also requested help from the state office to help with our expenses, which are going to be, if we've got to comply with this subpoena, they're going to be extensive. I have an attorney that I have talked to that we have utilized before. In fact, he's involved in the NAACP litigation, and I've talked to him about the possibility of assisting us in this thing. I have not retained him, have just talked to him about it, and before we make that move, if we're going to make that move, then we'll come back to the board and talk to you about it. It's my opinion that we go along with this motion and have the subpoena tested. I think it's a wrong move just to cave in the subpoena and start producing documents. And we may be, and if we did that, we might be the only county that's doing that, quite frankly. Now, there may be others, but what I know right now, we may be the only one that's not going this route.
Well, you know, if everybody's jumping off the bridge, you're going to jump off the bridge too. You know, there's illegal voting going on out there, and that needs to be investigated. And this is as good an opportunity as you'll ever get to do that. I don't have a problem if you want to reword what I just said to say this is the Beaufort County strategy in this. But we need to make our wishes known if you want to see illegal voting properly investigated and the people that are doing it put in jail. But if you sit here and go to quash the subpoena, if they totally quash the subpoena and it doesn't exist anymore, then there is no negotiating. And it is important, I think, for Beaufort County to take the lead. We can say this is our strategy if you want to do a resolution that says this is our strategy.
I'm going to follow our attorney.
Well, I'm pretty sure the Democrats are all against this.
Well, it ain't a Democrat thing, but you ain't no lawyer.
Well, this is not a Democrat-Republican issue. I'm assuming, based on what I've read and what I've heard, is that there's, even if that subpoena is done away with, they're going to come back with still with an investigation.
I think the investigation is continuing.
Yes.
I think this was just a step that they took. So this is not a lawsuit. It's only a subpoena that was issued by the grand jury, federal grand jury. So there is no lawsuit yet.
It's going to cost thousands.
But there has been an order issued that no records be deleted or destroyed that we're operating under the Board of Election.
That they not be destroyed.
Not be destroyed.
Exactly.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Francisco, if these subpoenas go through and we have to provide all those records, that is a considerable amount of time, money, and effort, isn't it?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And we're putting that information together. We're taking that precaution. On the other hand, to start looking at that and figure out how many documents are going to be involved. Thousands. It's anticipated that there's going to be an argument before the judge on this motion, and he needs to know how many total documents.
Thank you.
Wake County alone had over 1 million documents to produce.
And we're talking about multiple years. From what I have read, we're talking about going back multiple years.
Even Beaufort County is in the thousands.
That's what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. And even at that, it's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars just to duplicate those records. Is that correct? If we have to do it. Thank you.
Could you repeat your motion?
My motion is, we can do this as a strategy. Let's say my motion is that the Beaufort County strategy on this issue is not to quash the subpoena, but to reconfigure the subpoena request so that a reasonable amount of information can be presented and still accomplish what the grand jury wants accomplished. That's not exactly what I said before, but that's close.
Well, and to some actions taken, we're not even sure that any information. Here again, some of the reading I've had is that the state is saying some of this information that they're asking for, state statute does not allow them to have it. It's confidential information.
I believe that's true.
Confidential.
You can always subpoena confidential information. The state can argue that all they want to, but if you've got the information, it doesn't matter how confidential it is, it can still be subpoenaed.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
The subpoena is to the custodian of the records, and that is the Beaufort County Board of Elections.
That's right.
But we're going to pay the bill, so we have a say.
You are going to pay the bill, but you're not the custodian of the records, so you would need to separate, I would think, the two. Because if the board wants to make a broad statement that this is how they feel about it, I think the board should do that. But the board is not the custodian of the...
Oh, I agreed. I don't have a problem with that. I think you're right on target. I never intended to involve the Board of Elections in it, but the will of the board, because we are going to pay that bill. You, the taxpayer, are going to pay that bill. So he who got the goal makes the rules. But I feel like illegal voting should be investigated.
And I would agree with you on that, illegal voting.
Yeah, but the amount of information...
But how we get there...
Yeah.
Because I see what Brian's saying, we've got to be extremely careful. We don't step into the middle of something. We both get sued.
I think the concern that the elections director has expressed is that they have asked for election ballots. And those ballots that they've asked for can be directly traced back to the voter. And there is a concern from the Board of Elections that when you open that box and you start saying, you voted this way and you voted this way, that it goes against the fundamental bedrock of our elections, and that's their concern.
I agree, and I don't see why they need actual ballots. They should be looking at voter rolls and voter registrations and cross-comparing those kinds of things. I don't think they need the ballots, in my opinion, to do what they say they want to do.
And I think that's why they have asked to try to quash the subpoena to get it more in alignment with what it should be.
That's right. Right. And that's all we're saying is this is what our position is.
So the only question, if I understand you, then, it has to do with the amount of material. Can you get the information out of less records that do not break federal law? Is that what it is?
I think right now, and again, the county attorney has expressed that what the subpoena is asking for is a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And
from all 45 counties.
Millions and millions.
They're trying to narrow that scope, and the way you narrow that scope is to quash the subpoena and have them come back.
So is your advice that we leave this alone for now?
I would leave it alone for now, would be my advice. And let's.
I try to tell you.
We have to get it before the court so that someone else can look at the subpoena. And if they want to pare it down, then they can withdraw the subpoena and reissue a subpoena, for instance. Or the court can say, we're going to quash this subpoena. But it's the only way to test it. That's all that's going on here is a subpoena. And the motion to quash is the only way to test it.
But for a settlement of the suit, you're going before a judge, and it's no different than any other case that goes before a judge. It can be negotiated and settled before it gets to the judge if you have people who are saying the proper things, and that's what I'm trying to get us to do, is to say we really don't want to kill the subpoena. We think it should be negotiated to more reasonable terms. If you can negotiate those terms before it gets in the judge, in front of the judge, then you just present it to the judge and he approves it. So, unless somebody takes the initiative on this to say, we want illegal voting investigated, but your request is too harsh and it needs to be muted and redone, that's all that I would like for this board to do, is to say that. So what is wrong with that? We are entitled to our opinion.
You're entitled to your opinion.
No, the board's entitled to its opinion, too.
Well, my opinion is to follow the advice of the attorney and not the surveyor.
Can I ask a
Yes, you sure can.
Is any county fighting the issue that they don't want to open up their books and they don't want to investigate illegal voting, if there is any? Or are they fighting the subpoena because it's too broad?
Too broad.
It's, I would say overall, because the subpoena's too broad.
And
now, that's not to say that all the counties agree.
Okay.
But all that were involved in the phone conferences, we had a roll call. It was 33 or 34 counties out of 44 that was together on the first phone phone conference that were involved. And they seem to be pretty much one voice.
Let me ask you one more question, clarification. My understanding in the past has always been once a subpoena is issued, there's no negotiation of subpoena unless the judge rules it, throws it out, and then you start over again.
They could withdraw the subpoena.
Withdraw, but usually there's no negotiation on it.
Well, that's correct.
Yeah.
A subpoena is a subpoena. The only way to test it is a motion to quash. That's right.
And the negotiation is we'll withdraw the subpoena and we will resubmit that for this, providing all you guys don't challenge it. That's the negotiation. That can be done. Everything is negotiable. Me and Donald Trump, we can negotiate anything.
I believe that.
I don't think subpoena.
I believe that.
I'm not disagreeing with what you want to do, but I don't know. I think it has to go to the court for the court to decide. Then if they squash it, then you can start negotiation with the U.S. attorney or the grand jury. How do you? Well, really the U.S.
I would
Attorney.
agree with that.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Is there a second? Okay, the
I
motion
don't
dies.
disagree with you, but,
Well, I understand.
yeah.
All right, the next item on the agenda is a closed session, and I'll ask Katie, are you going to read us into...
A motion is needed to go into closed session under NCGS 143-3, 11A4 to discuss matters relating to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by public body, including agreement on a tentative list of economic development incentives that may be offered by the public body in negotiation, and also under NCGS 143-3, 11A5 to establish or to instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the positions of by or on behalf of the public body and negotiating the price of other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease, or the amount of compensation and other material terms of an employment contract or proposed employment contract.
You did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to go into closed session? Motion, is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
All right, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All right.
Do we have to make a motion to allow?
Okay, we have come out of closed session, and we will take no action. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Motion, is there a second?
Stand up.
Second. All those in favor, stand up.